So I'm joined today by my beautiful friend, Deborah Egerton, who is a fantastic champion when it comes to all things diversity and equality. You and I have been friends for a few years. We made friends because we have similar beliefs. We share very similar spiritual beliefs, but we also come from very different cultural backgrounds. We've had very different journeys in our lives. And so that thing about sameness and difference really plays into our friendship. And it's something which I absolutely love about our friendship, because I think it's definitely enhanced who I am as a person, having someone like you in my life who I can speak to and have those fresh perspectives when I need to know about things which are different to my life, but also when I need validation about some things which you share some ideas and beliefs and truths, which, we share as our own truths, which aren't necessarily truths for other people. But Deborah, I was just wondering, can you share with me how you think having friends who are of similar belief systems and value systems or cultures has enhanced your life?
Well, first of all, Suzette, I'm so delighted to be here with you today, because anytime I can sit down with you and have a conversation, it's amazing. And I feel like I'm blessed whenever we are together. Uh, you know, it's interesting how we came together, because it was that common ground and the cultural differences, because there was this sort of spiritual connection between us. The cultural differences became more of a source of joy, of really wanting to know more about each other. When you find people who you resonate with and that you connect at a deeper level, a level that you don't even really understand, that's when the relationship really blossoms. So through my entire life, I have found people that I recognize, and they come from all over the world. But we have a similar set of values, of things that we hold holy, things that are sacred to us. And that sort of seed or light that is within all of us, when I have line of sight to it, and I believe it's a blessing to have that, but when I have that, the similar ground just sort of puts us in a place where we can begin to explore what more is there to this person. But I will tell you, to stay within the parameters of your question, it has really made my life fascinating and joyful. And it has expanded my heart, because I'm open to hear and to listen and to receive whatever comes from someone who can stand in that space with me. And it's a circle of love.
There is that thing of when you find someone who is like you, it makes you feel whole. It makes you feel, I guess it's acceptance, isn't it? When you're so similar and you resonate with those shared value systems that you were talking about, it makes you feel whole, and it makes you feel like, actually, I have a place in this world. I know for me, I grew up in a small community in the north of England, and we all had a shared value system at our base. I'm from a Jewish background, but my family, me, my parents and my siblings were one of the only Middle Eastern families, Jewish families in that community. And so there was this difference between me and the rest of my friends in this communal setting. But there was this base value system which made me feel like I belong, even though our traditions were so different. Our ways of thinking were actually very different. My parents' journey was very different to my friends' parents' journeys. And it made me feel like I belonged, and it made me feel, as you say, loved. You feel loved.
Right. And Suzette, to add to that, when you think about what we're talking about when it comes to differences, it is that the differences become rather superficial if the values are the same. So, for instance, you have a Jewish background, I have a Catholic background. You grew up in a small community in the north of England. I grew up in New York City. You are what we would consider to be a white-bodied person. I'm what would be considered a black-bodied person. Those are differences that sometimes people can't get past those differences. However, what we value, how we love, how we raised our children, how we feel about just being kind and compassionate and open to anyone who needs help and taking that time to help them. Those things are underneath all of the things that people would think would make us different. And that's what we need to learn. We need to learn to look deeper. Don't let the external or the geographical or any of those things separate us when we sit down to have a proper cup of tea, which for me would be a cappuccino. You know how deep we go into conversation about things that really matter.
There are people who will sit there and tell me, no, absolutely not. You need to surround yourself with people like you. It's very important, because otherwise you are, I can't remember the word, but like liquefying your cultural background, or you're diluting it, or you're going to be intoxicated by other beliefs which go against your own. When we talk about people who are different to us, there's a lot of fears, right? I think a lot of the reasons why we put people who are different, black and white, and all the differences, I think a lot of it is obviously fear-based. Why do you think that is? What's the negative impact of surrounding yourself with only people like you?
Well, the negative impact is that there's no growth inside your own comfort zone. If you stay inside your own comfort zone, you don't grow. You don't learn about what, there's a huge world out there. And let's face it, both of us want to see and experience as much as we can. But if you are only comfortable with people that are like you, think about how limiting that is. It limits you. It doesn't allow you to really explore and experience, because you're so fearful of anything other than what you already know, that you have blocked all of your access to learning something new, to being in the position where you can access the grace of diversity and learn about different cultures, different people, just different ways of doing things that will actually enhance your own life. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get a different outcome. So if you're only sharing your life and your time with people who are like you, then that's going to be your whole life. And we cannot skip over the fact, Suzette, that for some people that works. For some people that works.
I know, and okay, I'm smiling away here because you've put it in such a way that I've never thought of it like this. With all the conversations you and I have had, I've never thought of being with people who are like-minded, people who are like you is your comfort zone. I've never thought of it in those terms. And it's true. It is comfortable being with people like yourself, right? And when we find friends who are like us, yes, when you're being challenged, you go to them and you ask them, am I right in the way I think? And they're going to tell you yes. Of course they're going to tell you yes, because they're the same as you, right? Of course they are. And that's comfortable. It's a great place to be. We have the opportunity to grow when we allow in people who are from different backgrounds. I know. So I'm lucky in that my parents didn't choose to send me to a single faith school. And not that I have anything against single faith schools. I think single faith and multi-faith schools both have their merits. But for me, I was very lucky that I went to a single faith school when I was young, and then I moved to France and I went to an international school. And in that international school, I had the most fascinating experience where I think I was the only Jewish kid there at a time when Iraq had invaded Kuwait. And there were about 100 Kuwaiti kids who had just arrived. They were in the south of France on vacation and they couldn't go back home. And so they all came to school on that first day of school. And the headmaster actually pulled my parents aside and said, do me a favor, I don't want any trouble here. Maybe tell your daughter not to divulge her ethnicity, her religious beliefs, or anything like that until we know that she's going to be safe and accepted. And that made me really, really nervous, because all of a sudden I am going in, I come from a completely different value system to everyone else. And there are always going to be these, these political ideologies in the background, which as a kid, I was 13, shouldn't play into my life, but they might. And I went into that school, and it was an international school. You had the Italians over here, you had the Swedish people over there, you had, there were all these groups. And the funniest thing was, I'm from a Middle Eastern Jewish background. I gravitated towards these Kuwaiti kids, and I made friends with them because actually there were so many similarities in our ways of being. And all of a sudden I started finding myself, questioning them there were one or two friends in particular who I became very close to. And I felt safe enough to ask them questions about their faith, about their culture. And even though there were definitely distinct differences between us, do you know what? They taught me things, and they opened my eyes to ways of being that I would never have known if I hadn't had that. And at the age of 13, that's really impactful, because I don't know about you, Deborah, but I think children, if they live within the same bubble for their entire childhood, then it's hard for them to open up when they're adults. You get fixed ideas, no?
No, that's very true. Doing all of the work that I do, even when I go into organizations, when I'm working with people who grew up where diversity was normal, it's not a steep climb for them to be able to connect and to be able to understand the concepts that I'm sharing, and so you'll actually see that they're sitting there visibly nodding. That was their normal. But it's when people have grown up, and I love the terminology, it's obviously on your side of the pond and not here, but I'm going to borrow it from you. Single face. When people grow up in single face communities and then go on to single face schools, and then, particularly when they get up to the level of higher education of going to university, this is when, if you have not incorporated some diversity into your life, it becomes so much more difficult to normalize it, because you've spent so much time investing only in what you already know. And the reality is, we don't know what we don't know about many things, but we really don't know what we don't know about people who may be different from us, and yet we share some common ground. So I always recommend to people, find the common ground and begin there, and your common ground may be your children. Your common ground may be your love of Christmas or your love of Hanukkah. Your common ground may be a department store that you love going to. Just find that little piece of common ground that you can come together and stand on. And then you'll find that there's more of that than you could ever possibly have imagined. And then there's this entire wealth of information and experiences that now you have access to, because finding the common ground allows you to develop a level of relationship. And this is what people don't understand. You don't go up to a stranger and say, Explain to me exactly why your people do what they do. You really need to develop a level of relationship, and you'll feel so blessed when the relationships that you develop are enhancing your own knowledge and ability to be comfortable with differences.
Okay, so that's interesting. You see, for me, I'm always looking for ways of breaking things down so that I can make sense of it, so that you can then build it up and help other people, right? I'm a therapist. That's kind of what I do in my everyday life. And what you're describing for me is that to have good, healthy friendships, which are with people who are different to you, takes time. There is a journey. This is what I'm hearing from you, right? It's a journey. It's not going to happen straight away. And you need to start building, and you start with that common ground, because obviously even the people who are similar to you are the same as you, and no one's going to be identical to you, right? We're all different. So the more you start on the common ground, the easier it will be to then move on to the less common ground and the shakier ground, and then the kind of danger zones. Because I remember bearing in mind that I'm in my late 40s, and conversations that we're having today, we weren't having 30 years ago, right? And I remember, speaking to a gay friend 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that, and asking him a question, and him taking huge offense to the question that I asked. And the reality was I was just interested. Nowadays, I would definitely have phrased the question differently. I don't remember the exact question. I just remember that I had phrased it wrong. I had phrased it in a way which had definitely offended him in a way that it didn't mean to cause offense. But at the same time, now that you're saying what you're saying, I didn't know him well enough to ask such a poignant question. I was asking intimate questions because I was fascinated. It was something that, I didn't know much about. I didn't know about homosexuality. I hadn't been exposed to it before. And I didn't know that actually you build up to these kind of conversations. I just wasn't that aware. And I think that's a really important lesson, particularly with our children, to make them aware that when you come up and you meet people who are different to you, give it time, be patient, because there's a certain amount of psychological safety that you need, and emotional safety.
Well, what's interesting though, Suzette, is that children don't have the difficulty navigating this that we do. When children come up with each other, particularly up until the age of about 7, they are just so naturally inclined to just embrace one another, fight over the same toy, roll around in the grass together and go home and come back the next day and do it again. It is all of these messages that we receive, we call them micro messages that we receive, and we start to receive them from the moment that we're born. And we can kind of, throw them off as children because we have one goal. Let's get to play. And I want to play with another person, and you look like another person to me. And so it stays very, very pure and innocent. And if you put a bunch of kids who are very different from each other, sort of physically, and you can see the physical differences based on the color of their skin, the texture of their hair, their size, their shape, and they'll just figure out how to play. But as we get older, and there's an expression that we use that is, as you're raising your children, the things that you say are in one ear and out the other. That's not true. It's in one ear and really down on the hard drive. And so those messages stay in the back of mind. And as you grow, those messages grow with you. And so this is where the fear comes in, because what you were taught, what you learned, what you heard, what you picked up from very well-intentioned people, your parents told you who to play with and who not to play with based on wanting to keep you safe. The community wants to keep you within the same community to keep you safe. And sometimes to not dilute the messages or the values of that community. But if that's what you're exposed to, then if you don't break out of that, by the time you go to university, it is very difficult. You're so accustomed to sameness being your normal. And in order to increase the level of comfort within your own comfort zone, you may begin to demonize anyone who doesn't fit within that same comfort zone. And we see a lot of that.
That's very true for a lot of people. I know when I'm working with someone in therapy, very often there are these beliefs. I think children, we pass on to our children our beliefs and our values, right? And when they're young, they don't question them. They just take it and they see them as true. And I think the more our children are protected, we'll use the word protected, by their parents, and they stay within a certain range of diverse range, which is not diverse at all. I think those beliefs and values become truisms, and they become truths to them. And the reality is that this is my own personal belief. I don't think there's any such thing as truth. I think I have my truth and you will have your truth. And sometimes those will align, sometimes they won't. And that's because there's no such thing as a truth. I think it's just, your truth versus my truth. But the thing is when you believe that your truth is the truth, that's when we start to have problems. And the reality is that as the longer you hold on to something which feels like it's true, the longer it's going to stay within you. It's going to fix. It's going to stay fixed. It's going to become less flexible. If children are allowed to go and explore different value systems and speak to people from different cultural backgrounds, then what they do is they start to question the values and the beliefs that they've been given. So, the parents are right. If they want their kids to be, mini-me's, they're right to hide them away. But the reality is that no matter what, our kids are never going to be identical to us anyway. I've learned with my own children, it's like pick and mix. It's like, here are my values, here are my beliefs. And they're like, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that. And that you can keep for yourself. And it's painful for a parent when your child does that, because you're like, why, what was wrong with that one? That was really good. Served me really, really well. I want you to keep that one. And my kids will be like, yeah, okay, but I'm from a different generation to you. And actually, I've met these people over there and they believe this. And actually, that resonates more with me than what you're teaching me. And I think still that door is open at university for people to explore that. But I think after that, it does become harder. And with social media and with everything, these echo chambers that we find ourselves being pulled into, that the more you click on something, the more you're going to be hit with the same messages from different places, the more fixed and inflexible we become, which is dangerous.
It is very dangerous. It's very dangerous because we cannot afford to continue to allow the way that we raise our children and the way that we navigate the world to be so small-minded. It's very small-minded to stay in just the embrace of one culture. And like I said, the danger there is about beginning to demonize in order to justify, particularly keeping your children in one culture, and not wanting them to have friends that don't look like them or don't have the same, sort of spiritual or religious background, or come from a different country. If you're going to put your child in that kind of an incubator, you're really not preparing them to live in the global society that we live in today. And so, I will tell you this, in the US, some of the sort of wealthier schools, usually they're called like country day schools or what have you. And what I have discovered, and this started happening a decade ago, many of those schools would call on me to go in and to help them figure out how to bring in more diversity, because they recognized that if you're going to give your child the best education possible, the best education ever, it's not just about what they learn in the books. It's also about their cultural experiences, their exposure, and their capacity to be able to be in any room with anyone at any point in time, and for that to be their comfort zone, for them to be able to really, really, really have no fear of being able to mingle, to have conversations, and to connect to people across differences. This is a skill that we actually need to be teaching our children, as opposed to, putting them in a little bubble and protecting them from what? Really, what are we protecting them from when we keep them in a same face, a single face environment? So, I'm very passionate about that, because when we think about the reality, we know that we've already seen that there are people who we will never reach, who it is what it is, and you and I can go out and talk to them until we're blue in the face, and it's not going to change who they are or how they show up in the world. But to give hope for the generations coming along now, really where this message needs to be heard and where it needs to land is with those who are raising their children now and deciding, what are the messages that I want my children to retain? And are they loving messages? Are they messages of love, compassion, empathy, and kindness? Is this the message that I am embedding in all of these values that I'm trying to pass on to my children? And the interesting thing, Suzette, is that when love is embedded within the message, the child can receive it in a much easier fashion. But when it's, I don't want you to be playing with, or I came up to visit you at university and look at the people that you're hanging out with. I'm so disappointed in you. These are the messages that are really hurtful, and they do harm to the children, the recipient of that message, and it's doing harm to the messenger, and it's also doing harm to the larger world, because those are messages of anger, fear, hatred. They're not helping any of us.
And I think you're absolutely right. But I would go one step further and say, you cannot teach this to your child until you're practicing it yourself, though, because it doesn't work one way without the other. You can't preach, acceptance and love of others if you're not showing your children that this is what you're doing. And so what I'm hearing from you, and my own personal experience of this in my own life and with friends and clients who I've worked with, is until you deal with your own fears and work out why you're afraid and what it is you're afraid of, why you would hold this group of people at arm's length as opposed to that group of people, it's until you deal with that, it's going to be hard for you to help your children to be more open and allow the world to come together in the way that you and I have this beautiful idealist vision for the world, right? And I think it starts with our friendships. I think it starts with opening our arms, opening our homes to people who are different to us. Because for me, I've got a friend who always tells me when you've got a difference of opinion with someone, it's very easy to go and say, they're wrong, they did this, they said this, and it's just wrong. And my friend will also look at me and she goes, Suze, it's perspective. No, they're not wrong. It's just they have a different perspective to you and you need to get your head around it. And she's absolutely right. And she's taught me so much over the few years that I've been friendly with her. And it's the same thing when people come from different systems, or, you know, whether it's cultural, even gender or sexuality or whatever it is, everyone has their own perspective. And we don't need to like each other's perspectives. That's something I've learned. You don't need to like it, but you do need to accept that everyone has the right to their own perspective, as long as it's not going to hurt other people, right? I think that, again, if we were talking about rules and boundaries within our friendships and how to have safe friendships, you know, there has to be that respect. You know, I know you and I have had this conversation about tolerance. I know, I can see you holding your head. I know it's a word which you absolutely detest, and so do I, because both of us think it is. I mean, okay, no, I'll let you, because you're much more eloquent when it comes to this.
Oh my heavens, you know, it actually, I can't even listen to the word anymore. And I share that when I hear the word tolerance, I hear my mother's voice, and she's angry and she's saying, Deborah, I will not tolerate that behavior. Not one more second. I will not tolerate that. And so, you know, tolerate, just the word tolerate, which tolerance comes from, it means to put up with. Who in the heck wants to spend their life recognizing, oh, wow, this is amazing, people put up with me? No, that's just wrong. And, you know, in every society, there is this, you know, this feeling, this belief that tolerance is a good thing. Tolerance is a baby step. It's a baby step. It is just one step towards saying, okay, I can hold my breath, hold my nose, and close my eyes, and I can tolerate being in this space with you. But I'm not going to accept you. I'm not going to acknowledge you. I'm not going to affirm you. I'm not going to appreciate you. I'm not really going to include you, and I'm certainly not going to celebrate you. And that is so hurtful. And the thing about, you know, both of us have things about the dimensions of our diversity that have been tolerated. You know, to be Jewish is to be tolerated by many. To be a Black woman is to be tolerated by many people. And so we know what that feels like. And yet the message has been sent out that tolerance, live and let live, you do your thing, I'll do mine, is a good thing. This is no way to grow a loving culture and society, and to create, you know, the true connection that we all, it's already there, we've just forgotten it, but the reality that we're all connected. I mean, we know, we can listen to the data that we are 99.4% the same if you test our blood in terms of our DNA, but we're going to get all, you know, sort of twisted up around differences that come from a place of where and how and who you were born to, whose body ushered you into the world, and all of the things that you did not choose. I mean, I didn't get to stand online and say, I want that skin color, and I want that sort of spiritual religious practice. And no, I don't want to be born until about 2000, because I want to be really cute by the time 2022 comes along. And oh, wait a minute. Wait, I want to be a really good tennis player. And oh, I want to sing too. And I want to speak 16 languages. We didn't get to choose any of that.
It's very easy to say we need to love each other, okay? And it's in an ideal world, we will. But if we come from very differing political systems, very differing cultural backgrounds, where your people did this to my people and my, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that? You can't just say, okay, now I'm going to open my arms to you and I'm going to love you because you're different to me. How do you help someone to navigate that?
Well, they have to be willing to do their own inner work. And, people always say, what the heck is that? I always hear, do the work, do the work. Well, what is the work? And, Suzette, the work is really surfacing the things that are within you, the messages that you actually took in and they're embedded in your being, and challenging them, challenging your assumptions, looking at your beliefs and asking, why do I believe this? And what even supports this belief? And I have one very simple thing that I teach people to do. And it is, when you take an action or speak to another person, and particularly across differences, ask yourself this one question: is this kind? Is it kind? What I'm about to say, is it kind? What I'm about to ask, is it kind? What I just said to my daughter about playing with your daughter, is that kind? Am I being a human in this world who is simply kind? Let's work with kindness, because that's the next step. Okay, so you can now tolerate being in the room with someone who may be different from you, but can you be kind to them? Can you actually do that?
What if being kind to them means you are being disloyal to your cultural, your family, the system that you come from? What if there is a challenge in that? How do you navigate that?
You have to decide who you want to be and how you want to show up in this world. At the end of the day, I believe both of us had wonderful parents, and we learned some wonderful lessons from our parents, lessons that we carried forward and shared with our children. But I'm not my mother. I'm not my father. I'm not living in the same time period that they lived in. I'm not of the same generation. And so, particularly being a Black woman, I did not grow up in the deep South in the United States. I grew up in New York City. So diversity was my normal. But the thing that I learned very early on was that when I navigate the world with kindness, I receive that back. And that's important to me. So the little things, it's really deciding that you're going to stand in your own truth, but you have to find your own truth and not just sort of go through life with this invisible bag that your family, your community, all the people who loved you packed up for you, and put all of these messages in there, and you never even open it up and examine it. You just keep carrying that stuff through life, and then you share it with your kids, and then your kids share it with their kids. It really has so much to do with finding your truth, examining and challenging your assumptions, asking yourself, why do I feel the way I feel about people who are different from me? Why am I fearful of people who are different from me? And is this really who I am? Is this who I want to be? And this is really powerful, Suzette. So I'm going to say it because I want people to hear it. I cannot believe the number of people who come to me now for therapy, counseling, just to work with them because their children are angry with them because they never talk to them about differences. about racism or anti-Semitism or any of that. And so now those children who are going out into the world, going off to university, are saying, so mom, dad, are you racist? I mean, this is a thing that I want people to recognize, that children grow up and they do develop some beliefs of their own. And when they do, they're going to hold you accountable.
Deborah, you've made the most amazing points. And I agree with you on all of this stuff. I think the way we raise our children, the way we show up in the world, once we've dealt with our own fears, our own questioned who we are, what we truly believe, what resonates, what doesn't resonate, helps us to move forward in the world and have that more loving, that opportunity to have a more loving world around us. And the more we have those friendships with people who are like us and different to us, so that we can learn from each other and be aware of each other's perspectives, I think it's going to hold us in better stead for the future and for the future of our children. Before we end, I do want to mention your book, because it's all about this. I mean, it's absolutely all about this. It's about the fact that we are, the Enneagram, which is what you teach, how, and what I love about the Enneagram is it's cross-cultural. It's got nothing to do with culture. It's about different personality types, how we show up in the world, how we operate in the world. And I'm going to let you just share a couple of minutes about your book and why you wrote this book.
Right. Well, the book, and I love it. I know that people may not be able to see it, but I'll show it to you because it's so beautiful. But the book is called No Justice, but that's KNOW, No Peace, KNOW, know what those things mean. And it's really about recognizing that, to be passive in this world is actually taking a position on the side of being not part of protecting and honoring and valuing all of humanity. So if you can sit back and see horrible things happening around you, maybe you're just seeing it in the media, and you're saying to yourself, oh, that's awful, that's terrible, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's not true. Because if you do nothing, then that really does allow the voices of hatred and hostility to get louder and to become more successful. And I wrote the book because I want people to wake up and recognize that everyone can stand in their power and their truth and do something about hatred and the racism and the othering, the umbrella term that I use is othering, anyone who is treated as less than and marginalized. And the Enneagram helps you to learn your truth, to stand in your truth, to understand how your personality structure can show up. And I demonstrate how it can show up if it's unhealthy, if it's passive, and what you will look like as an ally or an advocate if you activate. And put some exercises in there to help people to activate. We need to all be moving in the direction of goodness and love and purity and connection. If we're going to leave this planet for generations to come, we need to know how to leave it in a just and peaceful way. We need to be able to live that and to show that to all of our children and, like I said, the generations to come. So I hope people will read it. It's written with a lot of love, and it is a message of love and how love can be a force for turning all of this hatred around. Love and hate, they don't hang out together real well. So embrace love, tell hate, not on my watch, not inside my doors, and definitely not passed on to my children.
And my dear, that is why you and I are friends. Deborah, you're just, I absolutely adore you. I love your perspective on life. I love the fact that you bring different perspectives to me when I need it. When I need that someone who comes from a different background to me, I can come to you with questions. I am safe to ask you questions about your beliefs, even if they're different to mine, your values, even if they're different to mine. But I can also come to you to affirm me when there are things which I'm questioning in myself. And you will always come at me with love. You will always preach love when I have brought to you challenges that I'm going through with people who are different to me. I love the fact that you will always ground me in that stay kind, stay loving, understand their perspective as well is not the same as yours, and that is okay. Deborah, thank you so much for being my guest today. Love you to pieces.
I love you too, Suzette.